We're joined by another member of the championship team for Dubuque in 2012-2013, this time assistant coach of Dubuque back then. It's Joe Coombs. And Joe, thanks for taking the time today to join us and talk about a great team.
Thanks. I absolutely love to talk about it, and it's a pleasure to be back on with that group for sure.
So you were a part of the Fighting Saints the second they came back to Dubuque as the Fighting Saints in 2010-11. You were part of two championship teams. Let's dive back then before we get to 12-13. When Dubuque comes back as a USHL team in 2010-11, what was the buzz around the team? What was the feeling in the Dubuque community? What do you remember about that very first year?
Well, we had such great people. Cindy Fuller, did housing for 20 years, and Ted Shear was the GM, and Dr. David Field was, there was just such a community. We had won the 3 straight championships the years leading up to that. So I think in a lot of ways, I think that in a very positive way, I think there was a very seamless transition from, it was junior hockey to junior hockey.
Right.
Obviously different level, much better players. But there was a lot of core there. And those people were, obviously there was a buzz for, we had a new building, Bob Woodward. We can go on and on with the community there and the people that made all that happen. Obviously the Falcons and Brad Kwong, and it was just very seamless. We got together. I think it was the first time, the end of April, just in time. Bobby Kinsella, Jimmy, and myself. I think the first weekend we, if I remember correctly, we did the midget national tournament. Mm-hmm. We had 5 tenders to sign. Well, we got 5 players to sign compared to other teams. I think Shane Sooth was a part of both of those teams. He was there all 3 years. I was. Derek Dawkin, who was a great player. Joachim Ryan, Johnny Gaudreau. I think Zemgus Gergensen was another pick. So we pretty well hit it out of the park.
Yeah.
Early on. And then Vinny Sapineri came along. Our last tender, I remember telling Jimmy Montgomery, I'm a big fan of competing, and Jimmy calls me when he signs Johnny Gaudreau, and he says, "Hey, we signed our last tender." And I said, "Okay, great. Who was it?" He said, John Gaudreau. And I said, "Well, who's John Gaudreau?" He says, "Well, he's this little 5'8" guy. He's really skilled, and he's going to be with us for 3 years." And I sort of got upset, and I said, "What do you mean, 5'8"? Like, what's he going to do?" And Jimmy's like, "Hey, settle down. We're going to be okay. He's going to be a pretty good player." And it was a remarkable year. We picked up a couple guys who played in the league previously, Scott Wamsgans, TJ Schlueter, and the rest is sort of history. I know we got off to a slow start early in the year. I think we were playing in at the development program, and we were 0-4, I think. And we were walking across the ice, and Monty's like, "What's wrong?" And I said, "Monty, we're not competing." And sort of from there, he's a wonderful coach, a wonderful man, and I don't forget what he said at the end of the period, but the tide sort of started to change after that game, and then we got into a big brawl in Des Moines, and I thought I was getting fired because I'm yelling at the players to go, and he's yelling at the other coach. And next thing you know, we had 2 back-to-back 5-on-5s, and it was a remarkable year. And the team was they were a great group of guys. They had a lot of fun. Obviously, Luke Karate, and we were pretty good. I remember late first half, I forget where we were, and Monty looked at me and said, "We're going to win." And I was like, "What?" He goes, "We're going to win." Mm-hmm. And we did. And, we were in the other division that year, I believe, right? We were in the West, mm-hmm. I think. So we had to play Sioux Falls, which took us to the limit. That was a good hockey team. We beat them in 4, but we beat them in game 4 in overtime. But just all in all, it was a remarkable year. Obviously, pardon me, Jimmy leading the way, Bobby Kinsella picking the players, me cheerleading. There was just a lot of things that worked in our favor. But I know that there was a great foundation there. I'm a big history guy, and it was always important to me to know the history of Dubuque, the history of hockey. Jack Barzee, Ted Shear, Doc Field, all those teams. Kerry Eads was there back in their previous one, I think in '91 when they won. There was just a lot of great people that they had always surrounded their program with, and that continued right from the start in 2010. And we didn't have to do anything else but coach that hockey team and put that hockey team together. We had very few problems. We didn't have any problems with school. I mean, Joanne Gibson, I know, is still there working. She is an absolute godsend to those players. And you can tell there's still, I think Patty Schwartz is retired, I believe, but there's a community there that cares, and it was blatantly obvious from day one when I walked in the door in 05 to when I left in 13 that it's a place that I certainly hold near and dear to my heart.
So you win the championship in your first season in the USHL, a really good season that doesn't ultimately translate to a championship in year 2, and then right back to a championship team in year 3 in 12-13. When you're building out the team, when you're drafting those players, when you know who's returning, did you get a sense before the season and practice even started that something special was going to happen, or how early on did you get that sense for the 12-13 year?
That's a good question, because we really thought that in year 2 that, obviously Zemgus returned, where we didn't think we would get him back. We ended up with a couple injuries late, ran into a bit of a buzz. So Mike Matheson was our big guy on the backside. He had a great year, but just late in the year, it just wasn't. You could just sort of tell that it just was something that was amiss, compared to the year before. And then coming back, we got into a bit of a. You'd have to ask Monty. We got into a bit of finagle with Shane Suits, because we thought Shane was going to school, and he ended up getting drafted, I believe, if I remember the story correctly. I think he ended up getting drafted to Sioux Falls, and he's a big piece. He was a great player for us and great leader, and we got him back. And I forget the story, to be honest. We didn't think we had to protect him, and so we didn't. And then, I forget what happened, but we ended up getting him back. And then, Matt Benning, Carson Kuhlman had finished the year with us the previous year in the playoffs. And I can remember making the comment that kid's going to play in the NHL, and he sure has. He's a wonderful kid and a wonderful player. I remember him fondly. And then the pieces sort of just started to fall in place. I mean, Quenneville had 38 goals. We had a lot of depth. We had changed the way we played a little bit to a lot more pressure team, and we would come through the neutral zone at teams. I can remember being in the final against Fargo, and my good friend Byron Pools, the assistant coach, and we played them in the final. He just said, I've just never seen a team that could get a turnover and make it count so quickly the opposite direction. And you could just, and we're sort of right from the get-go, you could tell that we were pretty good. That was a pretty good hockey team. As much as I loved winning with the first year, that all 13 team was, I've often made comments that I get a lot of calls from USHL coaches, and they ask me the question and say, hey, would that kid be on any of your USHL teams? And I say, well, maybe 11, 12, but certainly not 10, 11, and not 12, 13. But that was a pretty special group.
Every player that I've talked to from that group has made a specific note about the practices from that season in 12-13, and they say how intense the practices was, and essentially if they could compete in practice, they knew that the games were almost quote unquote easy. I mean, what do you remember from the practices and how you and Monty kind of sketched them out and the way they were run?
Well, we had sat down early in the year. John Stevens, there was a year of the strike, a lockout, one or the other. And John Stevens came to town very early on, and maybe late August. And we had sat down with him and gone through some details that we thought we were missing. We sort of changed. Like I said, we became a real high pressure team, and part of that was practice. And John evaluated our practices, I think, for about 3 days. He evaluated the coaches. I can still remember him sitting down with me, and he said, "Joe, your energy level for the first hour is awesome, but your second hour, you tend to stand around more." And I'm, I obviously took the criticism to heart, and I'm like, well, what are we doing? Well, the first half of practice was always so intense, and we were always so involved. And then we would flood, or we'd take a break, and then we would come back out and do a lot more special teams. There was always a specialty there in that second half of practice where I just wasn't as involved, I guess you could say. But I was involved, but I did a lot more evaluating, I guess. So it was a wonderful lesson. But our team, they just wanted to practice. They just wanted to be together. That was a special group. I mean, that team was. Just the way we played, and how they spent a ton of time together, and everybody stepped up. I mean, even Frankie DeChara, I think at one point, I would have called Frankie DeChara probably maybe the month of December, maybe the best player in the league. Like, he was just a man amongst boys. And then when he faltered, somebody else stepped up. It was just always somebody, carrying the load. And when it mattered most, they never wavered. They never wavered with how we wanted to play. They never wavered with, and it started in practice. And there's still things I do to this day that, and I know Monty, I've talked to Monty about it, and I know there's plenty of things that he's still doing at the National Hockey League level that we were doing with that team. The habits, the details, the intensity, all great things that left a lasting impression on all of us. Certainly, I know me as, I've been a coach 20 years, and I've taken an awful lot from those 3 years, and took it with me wherever I've been.
I don't want to say things came easy for the team that year, but with the results, I mean, you continue to win, lots of streaks with 5+ wins, lots of points for that team. Was there ever a challenge of keeping the team focused and grounded when you rattle off that many wins in a row, or was that team pretty set on the end goal from the get-go?
I don't think that things wavered much. I know that Youngstown did us a huge favor in the playoffs. Grant Stanbrook, who's the greatest coach I've ever been around in my life, one of the greatest people I've ever been around. And we were very fortunate enough. Monty was very fortunate to have him for many years, and we still call him a friend. We still talk. But he was special. And I remember Grant saying something, that if it's never difficult, it's gonna cause more harm than good. Mm-hmm. If you don't have a challenge at some point. And we ran through that winter. I mean, I don't even remember our overall record, but I think we only lost 11 times, maybe 9, something like that.
I think it was 11 regulation.
Yeah, and there just wasn't a lot that scared us, but the players never wavered. They just believed in what the coaching staff and Coach Montgomery was selling. And they just never wavered. They never, ever, the way they practiced, the execution level. I mean, some of the goals that were scored in those 3 years in practice, it should have been entertaining for fans to come watch. Like, Johnny Gaudreau and Vinny Sapineri in 10-11 would pass the puck 4 feet in the air to one another, banging out of the air into the net. Like, it was just – and Monty being Monty, he loved watching that stuff. So we let it happen, I guess. But that team in particular, we got. I just don't think that we ever. What was our longest losing streak? 3?
Yeah.
We didn't even get. Did we?
I think 3 once, if I remember looking back at it correctly.
Yeah, I think that might have been early, or maybe January. I'm not sure. But Youngstown scared. I don't say they scared. I certainly was more afraid than Monty. I was the guy when 10-11 when it was 6-1. It was 7 minutes left in the first in game 4, I guess, in Dubuque, and I'm still coaching my ass off at the other end of the bench, and Monty comes down and says, "Dude, we're gonna win this game," and I'm like, "Oh, we're gonna win it when the buzzer goes. Until then, I'm gonna keep doing what I'm doing." He goes, "Relax, man. We're gonna do this." But in the same thing, I never changed, but that year against Youngstown, they came into us in the playoffs and we pounded in the first 2 games. And I don't think that we let up. I don't think that that's a great way of putting our team. They played well.
Mm-hmm.
Like I remember us being up late, going through film. Monty and I we'd get together after a game. He would probably stay up later than I would, and then I'd meet back with him first thing in the morning. And I remember making some adjustments, how we had to break pucks out and just some details that in the first game, 2 games, they went our way. And then they made some adjustments, and Anthony and Noreen did a really good job with that team. And they beat us twice. We went up 2-0 in the series in the semifinal, and then they beat us twice, and they beat us pretty handily. I'm gonna say game 3 might have been 4-1, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Game 2 wasn't a whole lot closer, maybe 5-3. Like I'm not even too sure, but it wasn't good. And the thing that I've learned, through winning and is that the best team is gonna, the cream's gonna rise to the crop. And we went to game 5 back in Dubuque, and I think it was 7-2. Like they did their best to hang with us, and they did. But we needed that. We needed that as a group to put I don't know for better words, but to put a little scare into us, maybe a little reality check. And then in the final against Fargo, we were very well prepared for every series. But the Fargo team that year, the big thing, I remember this fondly. I remember it was my job. Monty was big on making sure that they had the right defensive pair out against the right forwards on the other team. Mm-hmm. And early in that series, Monty would come back and say, "Coombsy," he'd be like, "Why are those guys not out there?" And I said, "Monty, they were." And what Fargo was doing was their shift lengths were like that. I think Toninato was there, the kid that plays in LA, I think. Like his shift length was like a minute 10, minute 20. And so I said like our pairings are out there for the first 30, 40 seconds, but maybe not for the end of it. Which I was okay with, and ultimately he became okay with. We didn't say anything, so I guess. But so it was the Fargo series. I know game 3, their goaltender Johnson was just out of his mind. Frankie Duchar scored that goal off a turnover, I think, off the left side entry, and made a great play. But their goaltender really is one that kept them in it. We were a better team. They're a good hockey team. Don't get me wrong, but I just think that we were better, and we were more prepared, to bring home a Clark Cup. I do remember, I guess you could say fondly, I winning at home was, I'm not gonna say it's better because they're both wonderful. But that first one on home ice was special. The second one was, we got on the bus, and I'm pretty sure the coaches were as tired as the players. So I know, I think we got on the bus, and I don't even think we had a beer. I think we just went to bed. It was exhausting. So, but that was a special group. And I know I still keep in touch with a few of the guys. I've not spoken to Carson Kuhlman. I've watched him play live a couple of times. Mm-hmm. Living in Philadelphia for a couple of years, that it was exciting to see him play. But I keep in touch with Matt Benning. I coached the D, so I keep in touch with a little bit more of those guys than I do the forwards. Not, a little bit more intimate back there, I guess, with 6 or 7 guys than it is with 14. But it was just a special group.
Looking at that Fargo series, I was talking to some of the players and then talking to Matt Fish, who was the broadcaster of the team back then. And I heard rumor of a pool party before the culmination of that series, a pool party at the hotel that you might have had some influence in. What do you remember about that situation?
I have to admit, I and nobody knows this, but I stole this from a coach I had. We were having dinner the night before the game, and I turned to our coaching staff and I said, I'm gonna do something here, but I said, you guys can't leave me hanging out to dry. And they're like, what do you mean? And I said, well, I'm gonna stand up and I'm gonna say something. And every one of these guys better jump in this goddamn pool with me fully clothed. And so I don't know exactly what I said. Something along the lines of, are you guys with me? Are you guys with us? Are we here together? And they're all like, yeah, coach, yeah. I said, well, and I jumped into the pool, fully clothed, the whole shooting shebang. And everybody came in. There wasn't a dry t-shirt or a dry pair of pants. It wasn't an option to jump down to your skivvies and get into the pool. It was we're going to do this and we're going to do it together. And was it something that needed to be done? Probably not, but I certainly thought that it might do something to rally the boys, or I don't know what we needed, but I had played for probably one of my favorite coaches was Lou Crawford, Mark Crawford's brother. Mm-hmm. And Bill Deneen. Back when I played junior, I always wanted to do something like that. And we were playing junior, and Louis Crawford told me a story that they went to a Christmas party, and his wife had gone out and bought him this brand new suit, and it was all this, black tie type affair. And I guess Bill Deneen stood up at this Christmas party and said, boys, we're going to win this year. And are you guys with me? And all the boys were like, yeah, we're with you. Well, everybody on that team, they won a Calder Cup that year, but everybody went into the pool. And it was something I'd never forgotten. It was something that I always wanted to be a part of. Mm-hmm. And that night at dinner, I thought, why not? If we're truly together, we're all going to get wet. So we did. And like I said, it was, you're making me think back to some times I haven't, through all this COVID stuff and sitting in my house, and, these are things that I haven't reflected on, but they were certainly great times with great people from top to bottom. Katie Kinney. I can't. My son was born there. Mm-hmm. I lived there for 9 years. In fact, even the first year that I left, we kept our house, and my family didn't leave, and we came back, and it was a year later that we decided to finally sell our house and, go about our business. So it's wonderful. There's no denying that.
Well, Joe, we appreciate you doing this. And before we let you go, I want to just take you back, because this is the final question that I've asked everyone. And it's, when Frankie puts that goal in, and you already referenced the play, but it seems like it couldn't have been more of a storybook ending for any team to score an overtime winner to win the championship. When Frankie puts that goal in, what do you remember immediately after that in regards to the celebration? Did you even see the puck go in? From your perspective, how did it play out?
We didn't have any beer. No, I truly, we won, and my first thought was champagne, beer, sparkling water, and that wasn't who we were. We were overly prepared in every sense of the word, except with celebratory things. I was standing. We were going left to right we were defending the left, so I was at the far end of the bench, and I saw it develop. But the Johnson kid, I'm telling you, that kid played. He ended up winning a national championship, I believe, at North Dakota.
Mm-hmm.
But just the kid was, I mean, that game should have been 5-0. Like, he was just remarkable. And Frankie put it in, and I turned, and I don't know, was it Mike Field or I'm not sure. And I mean, the players are off, and Dougie Jorgensen, was it Dougie that year? Yeah, Dougie Jorgensen. Doug Jorgensen. Dougie was our equipment man, and what a wonderful guy. You know, it was mayhem. I mean, it was different winning on away ice. You know, I can remember Dubuque the place was packed. I mean, that place was 76 degrees in 10-11 when we won. But you know, as a coach, you stand back and, you know, I think as coaches, you look at things differently. And you're watching players that you've gained their respect. You know, they respect you, and you're just so happy for everybody around you. That's really what I, you know, and every time we've ever got to that hurdle, taking a step back and watching is really something that I think my initial is to sit back and watch these kids celebrate, because they have worked tirelessly all year. Mm-hmm. You know, and then you switch gears right away into that to, you know, being delighted. And it's a feeling that I wish that everybody could feel. I've been looking and trying to get back since. Been close. Been a bridesmaid twice, which sucks. But just pure joy. I mean, I remember, I can see it right now, Frankie cutting in off the left side of the ice and pulling it to his backhand and putting it in the net. I'll never forget it. But just the sacrifices that are made, and the joy that you've gotten to that pinnacle, and you did it as a team. And both of those teams, and I can say every team in a sense reaches certain pinnacles, but reaching that top one is really special. And you know, looking back on the people that make it happen is amazing. The journey that everybody goes into. You know, I can come in the morning, and, you know, you got Joanne Gibson up there in the boardroom with those kids doing their schoolwork, and, you know, that's a sacrifice by her, because she ain't getting paid. You know, and whether you have a problem with a billet, or, you know, and Patty Schwartz, or, you know, just everybody did their job, and it's an amazing feeling. And I'd love to see Dubuque do it again. I'd love to be a part of winning again. Certainly in the driver's seat, and, you know, but again, we all do our part. So just straight joy. I mean, the answer, are you really thinking about anything? You know, when that happens, I mean, I know the weight of the world is off your shoulders. I do know that. So no, it was great. It was great. I'm really glad that you reached out to ask me to do this, and I hope I get a chance to talk to some of these other guys I haven't. I know I talk to Q every once in a while. I think it said that he was going to do it. Mm-hmm. Him and I have kept in touch. Matt Benning, a couple of those guys, you know, Monty. We all talk, but there's a couple in there I haven't. So I hopefully next week we can talk.
Yeah, absolutely. We're really excited to do that, and thanks for taking the time today to share some of those stories that we'll look forward to you sharing with the fans on Thursday night. Again, Joe Coombs, the assistant coach of that 2012-2013 team. Thanks so much for the time today.
Jack, thank you very much, man. And then you ever need anything, you let me know. I'll be there.
Will do. Might need a tea time partner at some point.
There you go. And if you're on your way back up here, stop in here. You can spend the night, and we'll go.
Will do. Sounds good. Thanks again, Joe.
All right, Jack. Thank you.